I'm going to tell you about a dive that officially never happened. A dive where two men vanished, where footage was seized at gunpoint, and where something beneath a trench moved in ways that physics can't explain. But before I do, you need to understand something. The three people who try to share this story before me are gone. Not dead, just gone. One vanished from her apartment with spiral symbols covering every wall. Another's entire house disappeared, leaving only grass where it stood. The third woke up in a pond 6 miles from home with no memory of walking there. I'm the last one left who remembers what we saw in 1979. And if you're hearing this, it means I've already started forgetting. In 1979, I served as a U.S. Navy diver, tasked with assisting Jacques Cousteau's team on a classified deep-sea operation. One diver vanished without a trace. They confiscated the footage, and what we witnessed moving beneath the trench, it wasn't alive, but it wasn't dead either. For decades, I stayed silent. But now I'm the only one who remembers what really happened. And once you've heard this, you'll understand why they ordered us never to speak again. We anchored off a French island that appeared on no civilian charts. They called it Ellet 7, though even that name was whispered among the crew. The island was nothing but jagged stone rising from black surf, draped in seabirds and reeking of rotting fish. It looked like the ocean was trying to swallow it whole. Officially, this was a scientific collaboration between Cousteau's expedition and the U.S. Navy. Unofficially, we were observers. I was one of 2 divers sent to assist, though everyone knew we were there to watch. And even that wasn't the full truth. The tension started before we entered the water. French crew members huddled in groups, whispering. They avoided Cousteau's eyes, which seemed strange. This was their legend, their captain. But he wasn't acting like the man from the documentaries. He stayed in his cabin most days, hunched over worn field notebooks and nautical maps, so old they looked ready to crumble. Around dusk, he'd emerge on deck to stare at the horizon in silence. The rest of us pretended not to notice, but you don't spend years in the Navy without learning to read a man. Something had rattled him badly. The briefing took place in the ship's galley. Flickering lights hummed overhead. A single topographical scan was taped to the wall. The trench plunged over 4,000 meters, narrowing at the bottom unnaturally. Cousteau barely spoke. One of his lieutenants walked us through the plan instead. Depth intervals, safety check-ins, fallback signals. Nobody mentioned the sonar anomalies, but we all knew. Something massive was down there. The French called it unmass. Afterward, Rohr pulled me aside. He was the Navy liaison, technically my superior, though we'd been through enough to skip formalities. He leaned close, voice dropping low. "Whatever you see down there," he said, "you don't talk about it to anyone." I didn't question him. I'd seen what happened to men who asked too many questions. On the morning of the dive, I found a gull impaled on the radar mast. It hadn't crashed. It was pierced clean through, as if something had hurled it from a great height with precision. The French crew tried to dismiss it, but one engineer refused to go on deck afterward. They sedated him before nightfall. We deployed at 600 hours. 4 divers, myself, Lieutenant Granger, Martinez, and Cousteau's man Etienne. We descended in pairs using an external cage system with tethered lines. Visibility was terrible. Silt hung in the water like frozen ash. Even with high beam lamps, we could barely see 15 feet. At 900 meters, sunlight vanished. The world went black. Cold invaded my bones despite the suit. With it came a childhood terror, the kind that wraps around your ribs and squeezes from inside. I drowned once as a kid, pulled under ice. I still dream about that white blur overhead, the unreachable surface. Being in that darkness made my lungs feel like they'd already given up. Etienne spotted the shelf first. He called out, something about the rock formation looking wrong. I saw it too. Too smooth, like it had been sculpted, not formed. Patterns traced along it. Grooves not quite geometric. Our lights caught subtle shifts in the grain, as though the stone was flexing. Breathing. We should have turned back. We didn't. At 1,700 meters, Granger's signal died. We halted. Rohr ordered us to hold position while they tried to re-establish contact. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Nothing. Martinez volunteered to check his last coordinates. Etienne went with him. I stayed at the descent hub, watching their lines vanish into the abyss. 5 minutes later, Etienne's line started vibrating. Rapid tugs, nothing like our standard codes. Erratic, then silence. I tried the radio. No answer. The vibration stopped. The line went slack. I control my breathing. The only sound were my regulator's slow hiss and the faint beep of my depth gauge. Then I saw light. Not from our equipment. From below, a dim, pulsing glow the color of old bone. It throbbed rhythmically like a heartbeat, or a warning. Then it stopped. I shouted into the comms. Silence. I began ascending without authorization. When I surfaced, chaos had erupted. Etienne's body had come up first. Alone. Granger and Martinez were gone. The French crew was panicking. Rohr ordered all comms sealed. Cameras, suit data, everything confiscated. Cousteau didn't speak for a full day. When he finally did, he gathered what remained of the crew privately. No recording devices. He told us what we'd encountered wasn't geological. That nature doesn't make shapes like that. That deep time does things we can't comprehend. Then he said something I'll never forget. It's not dead, he whispered. It never was. He canceled the expedition that night. We abandoned Ellet 7 without a trace. Within weeks, the dive logs were purged, the tapes disappeared, and Martinez was declared killed in training. I kept quiet for decades. I convinced myself I'd imagined it, that decompression sickness causes hallucinations, that fear distorts memory. But even now, there are nights when I feel the water moving beneath me, and it doesn't feel empty. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after surfacing, not because of what I'd seen, but what I hadn't. Martinez's face, his voice on the comms, Etienne's scream dissolving into static, and that pulsing light from below. That glow embedded itself behind my eyelids. It made dreams worse than memories. 2 days later, at the naval airstrip in Toulon, an unmarked white van picked me up instead of standard transport. No insignia. The driver never spoke. Inside, a document envelope sat beside me. My name typed across it. I opened it. 1 page. A non-disclosure agreement I didn't remember signing. My signature was already there. I didn't question it. I folded it up and stared at the sea through the window, wondering how many other names had been pre-signed. They flew us back to Norfolk on separate planes. I never saw Rohr again. When I asked about Granger, command said he'd been reassigned. I didn't push. You learn when a question leads nowhere. A week passed. Then the photographs started appearing. No return address. Just envelopes tucked under my door at night or slipped between mail. The first was grainy, like a sonar image, except the contours made no sense. Something immense, angular yet organic, occupied the left side, shaped almost like a rib cage wrapped in wire. The timestamp matched our dive window exactly. The second was worse. Black and white. A diver, possibly Martinez, floating upright, arms slack, lights off. He faced away from the camera, towards something beyond the frame. Motion blur streaked behind him. Not bubbles. Lines. Tendrils. I never learned who sent them, but I kept them. Maybe part of me wanted someone to see them after I was gone. Then came the cassette, a manila envelope on my kitchen table when I came home late. I didn't lock the door. Just turned the tape over in my hands. No label. Visible where on the magnetic strip. I borrowed a player from the maintenance worker downstairs. The first minute was static. Then voices. Mostly French, but not Etienne or Cousteau. An argument. Someone shouting about La Chose Vivante and Zone Interdite. Something about light signals not matching the sonar. And beneath it all, a low groaning like metal under pressure, except deeper, older, not from a ship. At 3 minutes, I heard my own voice. Not through comms, just my voice, breathing heavy, muttering, "It's still moving." I don't remember saying that. When the tape ended, I sat motionless. I hadn't noticed how cold the apartment had gotten. Every window was closed. The phone rang. No caller ID. Silence when I answered. Then, burn it. Click. Next morning, the tape was gone. I never saw the maintenance worker again. In the following weeks, I noticed a man across the street. Sometimes in a parked car, sometimes by the lamppost. always facing my building, never moving. I called the police once. They found nothing, said I'd been under stress, suggested counseling. They didn't see the envelope he left that night. Inside was a photo of me from the dive, descending alone. I wasn't supposed to be alone, and in the far corner, barely visible, was something else. A silhouette, long-limbed, watching. I tried tracking down the French team. Most crew members on the manifest didn't exist. Placeholders, fabrications. I found one engineer named Pierre, but his widow said he died of decompression sickness the week they returned. The open casket funeral was closed at the last minute. His skin had darkened, she said. His eyes were wrong. She wouldn't elaborate. I contacted someone claiming to have worked in the French Ministry of the Sea Archives. He gave no name, just an email that vanished after one message. It's not in the trench. The trench is inside it. I stopped sleeping. One night, I woke standing in my bathtub. No memory of getting there. Water to my ankles. Faucet running, though I never turned it on. The mirror had fogged over despite my not using the shower. Something had been traced on the glass. 5 parallel lines. Like gills. Next day, I booked a flight to Marseilles. If Cousteau had buried anything, it would be in his private logs. Public archives were scrubbed clean, but his estate held private papers in a vault at the Oceanographic Institute. I claimed to be researching a book. That opened doors. I wasn't ready for what I found. Pages of sketches, not maps or marine life. Patterns, diagrams of impossible geometries. Recurring symbols like spirals within jaws. Notes in 3 languages. References to l'observateur, the watcher. One passage stood out. It does not move through time. It carries time. It is not the deep. The deep is its shadow. Below that, scrawled in English, do not dive. Do not look back. The final entry was dated 3 days after our dive. Cousteau's handwriting had deteriorated. Ink smeared. They made contact. They don't know it yet. The shape responded. Light and time are wrong down there. I saw myself. I was already drowning. I copied what I could. But when I returned to the hotel, the pages were gone. No forced entry. Nothing else missing. Except my reflection. I stared in the bathroom mirror for 10 minutes. For one breathless second, I swear I watched him blink before I did. And he smiled. I backed away, heart hammering. The face was still mine, mostly, but something about the eyes, the slack jaw, the too calm expression. It had observed me, not mirrored me. When I blinked again, everything snapped back. My panicked reflection stared back, breath fogging the glass. I wiped the mirror and kept the light on all night. Next morning, a block number called. You've been marked. I tried to trace it. No luck. The line disconnected when I asked who they were. That day, interference started coming through my apartment radio. Even powered off. Low tones. A hum. I thought it was the wiring. Then I noticed it always began at 3:17 a.m. Every night. Clockwork. 12 minutes, then it cut off. I recorded it. Ran it through audio software. The waveform wasn't random. It had symmetry almost like language. Patterns folding inward. Pulses within pulses. One section repeated, but slightly distorted each time, as if something was mimicking itself while forgetting the original sound. I sent the file to a former intelligence contact. 3 days later, he emailed back. Stop. They're listening through it. I deleted it. Smashed the radio. That night, the hum returned through the walls. Desperate, I drove 3 hours to visit my old dive partner, Turner. Retired. Quiet life near a lake in Pennsylvania. Hadn't spoken to anyone from the service since '82. He opened the door, looked me in the eyes, and immediately said, You went back, didn't you? I hadn't told him I was coming. Turner hadn't aged well. Pale, gaunt. His hands shook pouring coffee, and he kept glancing at the hallway mirror like it might lunge. He'd been on a different mission months after ours. Another French joint op, supposedly unrelated. It wasn't a follow-up, he said. It was containment. They deployed sensors down the trench. Found movement. More lights. Echoes that wouldn't bounce back. One diver saw something rise from the darkness. Something thin and long that didn't break the surface, just pressed against it from below, like a finger testing a membrane. He wouldn't say what happened next. only that they abandoned the project and scrubbed the records. His dive footage corrupted, the metal from his suit pitted and warped. Ever since, he'd stopped trusting mirrors. "They're not reflections," he said. "They're invitations." I left with more questions than answers. When I returned to my apartment, the lock was broken. Nothing stolen, nothing disturbed, except the bathtub was full again, ice cold, and floating in it was my dive tag from Ellet 7. I hadn't seen it since the mission. I packed and went off-grid. Motels, cash, no electronics. I needed time to think. It didn't help. In a motel outside Albany, I found a manila folder under my door. Inside was a photograph. The same trench from our sonar logs, but updated. New timestamp, recent, and something was rising from it. I needed proof, something that couldn't be erased. I reached out to a journalist I trusted, ex-Navy, like me. Her name was Dahlia. Skeptical, but she agreed to meet. I brought copies of the photos, Cousteau's sketches, the audio spectrograms. She didn't speak for a long time, then asked, "How certain are you it hasn't already followed you?" That night, she disappeared. Her apartment was found open, no straged, but her walls were covered in drawings identical to Cousteau's. Spirals, teeth, watcher sigils, and in her bathroom mirror, written in condensation, "Too late." I was being hunted, not by a person, not even by something alive as we understand it. This was an echo, a thought form that attached to the moment you comprehended it. Once you saw it, it saw you back. I try to forget, but the trench keeps calling. And last night, I saw something that broke me. On a cracked security monitor in the motel lobby, I caught a flicker. Just a few frames. A hallway, my hallway, and Martinez, soaking wet, standing in the corner, smiling with someone else's mouth. I ran, grabbed my keys, and fled with the hum still rising through the walls. I drove all night, not caring where. Roads blurred. I crossed state lines I didn't recognize. My hand shook so hard I could barely control the wheel. I stopped twice for gas and once to vomit behind a diner. Martinez's face, that impossibly calm, waterlogged grin, played on repeat. By morning, I'd reached an old military contact north of Montauk. Lacey, retired, off the grid. He owed me, and he believed, always had. He took one look and didn't ask questions. Just waved me inside and locked the door. He had a basement bunker, soundproofed, analog equipment, thick walls, no windows, the kind built by people who understood surveillance. We stayed 2 days while I told him everything. When I reached the part about the trench, the lights, the breathing stone, he went still. Then he stood, went to a file cabinet, and pulled out a folder marked OM7. Inside were photocopies of reports I'd never seen. Sonar scans from 82, months after our dive. French submersibles had returned, unmanned. They recorded faint vibrations pulsing at 6-minute intervals. Biological rhythm, but impossibly deep, impossibly massive. And they didn't echo. One page showed the final sonar return. A formation had risen near the shelf wall. Risen, not drifted, not shifted. It stood. When they tried launching a secondary probe, something hit the cable hard enough to sever it. No known current could explain that force. The report ended with a handwritten note from a French naval officer. Not a habitat. A perimeter. Lacey had more. He played a recording from a declassified deep-sea microarray the Navy used for tracking Soviet subs. Most files were just static and whale calls. One captured something different. Rhythmic thudding. Dull metallic. Like pounding from inside a sealed vault. And then a voice. Not words. Not speech. Just a tone. Low and layered. Like a choir trying to whisper underwater. Lacey stared at me when it ended. "That was 800 meters from your trench," he said. 3 weeks ago. It was spreading. I asked if he'd ever encountered anything. He hesitated, then admitted once, off Alaska. A buoy returned corrupted footage. Frames showing the water folding inward. Like a wound opening. He didn't elaborate. By the third night, I heard it again. The hum. Even underground with no radio. Not in my ears. In my head. A vibration behind my skull, like a tuning fork pressed against my brain. I couldn't sleep. When I closed my eyes, I dreamed of sinking. Not into water, but something slower. Thicker. a sea made of time, and beneath me, the watcher waited. Lacey found me pacing in the dark. I told him it was getting closer, that I couldn't stop seeing the two spirals, that sometimes my reflection moved first. I expected dismissal. Instead, he handed me a worn Polaroid, faded, edges curled. It showed a dive team in full gear beside a launch rig. One was Martinez, but the date scribbled in the corner was wrong. 1983. Martinez had vanished in 1979. The photo wasn't old. The ink was sharp. I felt sick. That night, I left. I didn't want Lacey near whatever this had become. I don't know if it follows people or grows within them, but I knew I was marked. He wasn't. Not yet. I drove back to the coast. To L at 7. It took bribes, favors, a fake badge, but I got on a private marine research vessel posing as an archaeology team. They were mapping supposed ruins. I didn't care. I just needed access to that trench. I brought only essentials. No digital gear. Just analog sonar, a depth gauge, and a pressure-hardened cassette recorder. I told the crew I was collecting baseline audio. They didn't question it. The descent was worse than I remembered. At 500 meters, the silence changed. Not absence of sound. Presence of something waiting to speak. The water felt denser. Colder. Wrong. At 1,400 meters, the lights flickered. My pulse spiked. I whispered to myself to stay grounded. Repeated names of people I'd lost. Martinez, Dahlia, Turner. At 2,000 meters, the trench wall appeared. Unchanged. Still smooth. Still pulsing faintly with that almost breath. Then something emerged from it. Not a creature. Not even a form. A ripple, like heat above asphalt. A creature. Not even a form. A ripple, like heat above asphalt. Except it moved through me. I gasped. My mind stuttered. Memories flooded in. False ones. Me as a child on that island. Me drowning in a place I'd never swum. Me walking with Martinez last week. Last year. Yesterday. Then I saw it. The Watcher. Not with my eyes. With something deeper. It filled the trench without shape. Like a thought too vast to think. My heartbeat stilled. The water surrounding me was no longer water. It was knowing. A voice spoke. Not in sound. In meaning. Return. I screamed. Kicked away. Shot upward too fast. Lungs burning, blood screaming. Didn't care. Broke the surface gasping. Collapsed on deck. They said I'd been underwater 12 minutes. My recorder ran for 30. I listened once. In the background, beneath my ragged breathing, was my voice. Calm. Measured. Repeating 3 words. I found it. They quarantined me in a decompression chamber for 72 hours. Standard protocol for rapid ascent, they said. I didn't resist. Didn't speak. The doctors ran tests. Scans, reflexes, blood work. They kept asking if I remember my name, if I could count backward from 100. I answered when required, but mostly stared at the wall. Because behind my eyes, I was still there. Still descending. Still hearing myself whisper. I found it in a voice I don't remember using. They released me without incident. No debriefing. No interrogación. Just a signed waiver and an envelope of cash from no official agency. I walked out alone. A week later, I started losing time. It began with minutes. I'd be walking and realize I couldn't recall where I'd been. Then it stretched. Half an hour lost in a grocery aisle, blinking at rice I didn't remember picking up. Once, I woke standing in a pond 6 miles from my apartment, shoes in hand, no memory of the journey. I stopped checking mirrors. Not because of what I might see, but because I feared it would look back with recognition I didn't understand. I tried destroying everything. The dive suit, oxygen tank, every piece of equipment. Burned it all in a field at night. But when I returned, the dive tag was hanging from my doorknob. Dry, clean, polished. I tried visiting Turner again. The house was gone. Not abandoned. Gone. Just grass and a mailbox rooted in dirt, as if nothing had ever been built there. Neighbors said the lot had been vacant for years. But I remember the coffee, the Polaroid, him shaking, whispering about mirrors. The way he said, "You went back, didn't you?" before I'd even spoken. It's rewriting everything, not erasing truth, bending it, reshaping memory the way the trench reshaped time. We thought we'd encounter a creature, but I know better now. We witnessed a concept, something sentient that doesn't exist in flesh or form. It lives in ideas, in observation. Once you perceive it, it can reach you through tape, through water, through your own understanding. The more you know, the closer it gets. That's why Cousteau stopped, why the records vanished, why Martinez's name was struck from the logs, why I remember moments that couldn't have happened and forget ones that should have mattered. The trench wasn't a location. It was a message, and I answered it. I tried warning people, anyone, sent files anonymously. The sonar, recordings, sketches, left copies in library books, mailed USB drives to news outlets, dropped burned discs at radio stations. But the stories didn't spread. No articles printed. No shows aired. Some places burned. Some reporters vanished. And some simply forgot what I'd told them mid-sentence, blinking like they'd walked into a room and couldn't remember why. They're protecting it now. Not the government. Not a shadow agency. The thing itself. The watcher. It doesn't kill, not directly. It erases slowly. Softens thought. Makes truth feel uncertain. Like a dream you're sure you had but can't articulate. But I remember Etienne's scream. The way light bent around the trench. How it didn't reflect. It absorbed. Hearing myself speak in a voice that wasn't mine. Martinez standing dry on a ship that should have been miles below. And I remember the word Cousteau whispered that day. His face pale with terror. I hadn't understood then. Anchor. That's what the trench was. What it is. A mooring point for something that doesn't belong in our world. Something vast and coiled and thinking. We anchored it by seeing it. And now we can't unsee it. I've documented all this. Stored it on analog tapes, handwritten journals, letters sealed in waterproof envelopes. Scattered them across cities, tucked behind loose bricks, slipped into library drop boxes, wedged under old church pews. Because they'll come for me. Or worse, they won't have to. One day I'll blink and forget it all. I'll watch the mirror smile first. But someone needs to remember. Because it's still there. It's always been there. And it's waiting for another signal, another descent, another name to whisper across the deep. Even now, as I write this, the faucet drips in a rhythm I know too well. 12 beats, then silence, then 12 again. And in the reflection of the water in the sink, I see something standing behind me that isn't there when I turn around. Something tall, thin, watching with patience older than oceans. So if you find this, if these words reach you, don't listen to the recordings. Don't look at the trench. And above all, don't remember too much. Because that's how it finds you. That's how it begins.